The Russian army is facing an unprecedented shortage of tanks. During the period of the Great War, the Kremlin lost 20,000 of these combat vehicles. About the causes and consequences of the tank crisis faced by the occupiers. Coming up next.
Pilots from the 3rd Assault using 2 drones destroy a Russian tank that was hidden in a forest plantation. One of the drones flies right into the barrel. Videos like this showing the destruction of a tank have become quite rare over the past year, since the Ukrainian armed forces have knocked out a huge amount of the occupiers' equipment. The Russian army is essentially forced to carry out assaults on foot or on motorcycles.
They're running out of infantry fighting vehicles and tanks. So they have to put infantry simply on motorcycles and on unarmored civilian vehicles.
Since the start of the full-scale invasion, over 11,000 Russian tanks have been destroyed in Ukraine. These are figures from the General Staff of the Ukrainian Command. The Russian armed forces now have only a third of the tanks in reserve that they had before the invasion of Ukraine began.
After 3 years of war, Moscow has depleted its tank reserves to such an extent that, according to reports, they are almost exhausted. Although the Kremlin insists there are no problems replenishing tanks. Notably, in 2022, Russia's tank reserves were stored at 24 bases across the country. And today only 9 such facilities remain in operation. Peter Sutsiu, military analyst.
Russia has significantly slowed the use of Soviet-era tanks on the front line as the gray zone is filled with Ukrainian UAVs for which tanks are easy prey. Data on the loss of a large portion of tanks in the war with Ukraine since December 2022 is also confirmed by the American Institute for the Study of War.
Russia still has 46% of its pre-war stock of tanks, 42% of its pre-war stock of infantry fighting vehicles, and 48% of its pre-war stock of armored personnel carriers. Images of 8 Russian military depots apparently show that Russia has depleted most of its vehicle stockpile warehouses. A social media source estimated that Russia will likely exhaust its remaining stockpiles of tanks and armored vehicles by the end of 2025. Russia may have additional armored vehicles and tanks in covered storage that are not visible in satellite images.
The Russian Federation is now facing a dilemma. The stockpiles of Soviet-era armored vehicles are almost completely depleted. About 60% of the Soviet-era armored vehicles that were in long-term storage depots have already been lost. On the territory of the Russian Federation, they have been effectively destroyed by Ukrainian defense forces.
Over more than 3 years of war, the Kremlin has withdrawn most of its tanks from storage. These vehicles went from storage to depots and then to the front lines where they were destroyed, captured, or abandoned. The resources and efforts spent on restoring these vehicles did not pay off and did not deliver the desired results on the battlefield. Now, there simply isn't the necessary amount of equipment anymore.
According to the latest intelligence data from open sources, as of today, Russia has only 2,887 tanks in storage, and more than half of them are in poor condition. Less than a quarter of them could be classified as suitable for use on the battlefield. Fewer than 100 T-80 tanks were considered relatively modern, while the rest included outdated T-62, T-64, and T-72 tanks. Of earlier models,
The Russian Federation is capable of reviving between 1,200 and 1,400 units of Soviet armored vehicles, but not of producing new ones. According to the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, the production of new tanks by the Russian Federation amounts to about 180 to 200 units, and taking into account the number of armored vehicles being destroyed. On the line of combat contact with the Ukrainian Defense Forces, this is a drop in the ocean.
Taking into account figures from various sources, the question now is not whether decommissioned Russian tanks will appear on the battlefield, but when this might happen and whether it is even possible in the necessary quantities.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Now let's move to the Lyman and Sloviansk directions of the front. Let's be honest, these are sacred targets for Putin and his entourage. Accordingly, the situation here is also extremely tense. In the Lyman direction, Ukrainian units repelled 6 attacks in the areas of Hrikivka, Kolodyazy, Novoselivka and Derilova. 2 attacks are still ongoing. In the Sloviansk direction, Ukrainian soldiers repelled 5 enemy attacks. Occupying units are trying to advance in the areas of the settlements of Serebryanka, Yampil, Dronivka, Viemka and Fedorivka. 2 combat clashes are still ongoing. For the first time, Ukraine's defense forces have showcased the middle strike drone, which strikes enemy targets and equipment both in Crimea and along the front line. And here is the Bulava, Ukraine's answer to the Russian Lancet, which destroyed quite a bit of Ukrainian equipment at the start of the full-scale war. Now it's our turn, say Ukrainian defenders, as many drones have already been delivered to the front line. Special TCH correspondent Yulia Kirienko will tell you more. Watch her exclusive report.
We're interested in any kind of equipment, maybe some forces, air defense assets.
And to find this equipment, Dmytro will be helped by the Middle Strike drone, a new product of Ukrainian manufacture. The Leleka UAV plant has long been supplying such drones to the Ukrainian army. But this particular reconnaissance drone is a modified version which can now fly hundreds of kilometers from the line of contact. Since the Russians transferred significant reinforcements to the Pokrovsk direction, there have been battles both in the sky and on the ground here, the military say. The occupiers are trying to capture Pokrovsk at any cost, so while they are amassing equipment, Dmytro and his team's task is to find it as quickly as possible.
Right now, we're gaining altitude to see if we can operate or not. We've already been given the target. We're taking off now. If it doesn't leave, then we'll destroy it. If it does leave, then we'll look for something else. An anti-aircraft missile system.
While the UAV rises above the clouds to spot enemy armor, the soldiers take something out of a box that looks like a construction set. This is a medium-range loitering munition. Exactly what you need not only to find enemy equipment, but to destroy it as well. This is probably the coolest thing I've seen at the front. It's a loitering munition that flies far beyond the line of contact, deep into Russian rear positions. It looks like a Lancet, but it's a Ukrainian-made counterpart. By the way, it's funded by foreign partners. This is the Bulava. The defense forces are showing it to journalists for the first time. Last year, it was only presented at closed defense industry exhibitions. And for several months now, it has finally made it to the front. A significant order for our military was paid for by partners from a northern European country to Ukrainian manufacturers. In 2023, soldiers could only dream of a kamikaze drone capable of burning through Russian armor appearing in the army.
Now, such munitions are striking targets even in Crimea. That is, we are now using them on our own tactical battlefield. But I know of cases when our Ukrainian loitering munitions, Bulava, Ram, X, flew into Crimea and destroyed helicopters there.
But the task of this drone now is to weaken the enemy near Pokrovsk. Such complexes as Leleka and Bulava are already operating in several units of the unmanned systems forces.
There were 5 sorties, 5 hits.
Just 2 years ago, Russia had the advantage in this type of drone. Their Lancets burned up more than 1 gun or tank in the Ukrainian army, and there was no escape from them. After all the defense forces could counter the occupiers with were FPV drones, which destroyed equipment as it was approaching our positions. Now, thanks to Bulava and similar systems from the middle strike line, the Russians are forced to hide their guns far behind the front lines.
That wasn't the case before. Before, only nearby positions were covered. For example, FPV drones and similar things were used. Now we can cover a greater distance. This is an American Camel munition, meaning it burns through armor and equipment.
Exactly what we need for the target that Leleka found. Now the main thing is to properly calibrate the munition. Carefully carry the drone to the catapult and launch the disposable into the sky. The Bulava rises into the sky. A kamikaze drone worth $30,000 irreversibly flies beyond the horizon. While the pilots were preparing the drone, enemy scouts realized they were being hunted and the armored vehicle drove away. The pilots are urgently searching for another target because they simply can't afford to launch such an expensive kamikaze into the ground.
We're now in free flight, so we'll look for targets ourselves.
They managed to do this fairly quickly. The reconnaissance drone is transmitting a clear image to the pilots. And in the tree line, they spotted a military vehicle. They hope it's carrying ammunition.
We're going in for the strike.
Target destroyed. It turned out to be a truck with provisions. That's not bad either, say the pilots. Russian infantry has long had problems with food and water in the trenches. Because in this phase of the war, the advantage goes to those who can supply their infantry without interruption. The task of the drones in the defense forces is to prevent the enemy from doing that. Otherwise, their infantry will either surrender on their own or remain in the fields of Donbass.
That's all for today, but very soon on Front News there will be new unique reports from our journalists brought to you from the hottest spots of the war so that you know the truth. This was Sergei Malnev with you. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones.